Okay, I know I'm a little bit late to the plate on this one, but with the Justice League film coming later this year, I thought it might be a good idea to cover this film before talking about that one. So, major spoilers ahead, obviously. So, I'll begin by asking you this question. Is it wrong that I didn't hate this film? Because I felt I was kind of supposed to, but my expectations were so low, it wasn't difficult for this film to entertain me. Seriously, Batman vs. Superman has been railed on by critics and fans with some noteworthy backlash on Rotten Tomatoes to such a degree that director Zack Snyder actually said he thinks Rotten Tomatoes is destroying Hollywood. Okay, serious hyperbole, but whatever. He didn't appreciate the negative reviews, I get it. To be fair, the film probably didn't deserve the level of scorn it received, but it also didn't cover itself in glory either, considering that the initial cinema release version cut so much out of the film, like whole story elements and character moments were eliminated to the point of making aspects of the plot difficult to follow or just plain confusing. And the film is still a bit confusing and disjointed as it is, with drawn out sequences that make the film boring in places. Now, I received a better representation of this film than most cinemagoers did, as I've only watched the full director's cut 3-hour edition, so I was able to get the entire experience in one sitting. Now, realistically, it's insane that this film is as long as it is. It suffers badly from a slow opening first hour, way too many characters, plot threads, setups for the next franchise installments. There's far too many factions, way too much going on. It's all a tad overindulgent by the filmmakers. Now, for a film billed as an epic battle between DC Comics' two biggest superheroes, the actual fight takes up about 5 minutes of the film. And then the resolution between Batman and Superman is far too quick to the point of being laughable. Any excuse to get superheroes fighting each other these days, just like with the Marvel movies, it seems. The highlights and low points were to be found in some surprising places in this movie for me. First and foremost, Henry Cavill is very wooden as Superman, but to be fair, he has very little overall story arc. A few scenes with his mother and a nice dream sequence with his dead father, one or two Lois Lane scenes, and then ultimately his death at the end of the movie. He's just not a relatable character and really isn't given much to do. He doesn't really bond with Ben Affleck's Batman/Bruce Wayne. I couldn't find myself caring for this iteration of Superman at all. He was just an underdeveloped background character for much of the movie. I did quite like Jesse Eisenberg's Lex Luthor, despite him having very poor motivations for doing what he was doing throughout the movie. Kind of a typical poorly written bad guy. He was compelling to watch and a much needed jolt of charisma and energy into the film. I was disappointed that a film that was supposed to be about Batman and Superman would include so many other DC characters to the point of stealing the limelight. The character of Wonder Woman seems fine to me, and I'm sure her movie will be decent enough, it looks okay, but she's just thrown in here as an advertisement for that film. The problem, I think, is that DC were caught on the hop by Marvel. Marvel took several years and movies to develop their cinematic universe, establishing Iron Man, Captain America, Hulk, and Thor in their own films prior to gathering them all together for the first Avengers film. Meanwhile, DC had to finish up Christopher Nolan's Christian Bale Batman films, so they were way behind. But DC is trying to skip too many steps. Starting with Man of Steel, then this film, then Wonder Woman, Justice League, Aquaman, they're doing it all backwards. It's all a little bit rushed in order to create a big money-grabbing cinematic event. It would have been nice to see this version of Batman played by Ben Affleck in his own standalone film prior to his appearance here. Incidentally, Affleck steals the show, and Jeremy Irons is very strong as Alfred. This is a much more comic book style interpretation of a superhero universe than Nolan's Dark Knight films. I'm not really a fan of the over-the-top cartoonish action in these movies. I prefer the Dark Knight and Logan styles and interpretations because they're just so much more realistic. But nevertheless, there's a time and place for this kind of fantastical superhero film as well. The action set pieces and fight scenes are decent enough, nothing super memorable beyond the Batman vs. Superman fight, of course. Even the massive end bad guy fight, it just lacks any real emotional resonance. It felt more like a CGI fest. But at least the fights aren't complete visual effects blurs either, like they were in The Man of Steel. I found the action sequences in that film to be unwatchable. In a way, this film suffers from a similar problem to Star Trek Generations. The whole point of that film was to get Kirk and Picard together, to get some screen time between Shatner and Stewart at any cost. So the entire plot is just one big convoluted excuse to make that happen, and every scene is just dragged out to fill the runtime until they can both finally meet each other in the Nexus. This film is a little bit like that, in a way. The whole premise of this film is Batman versus Superman, the two of them fighting each other. But you can't have 2 or 3 hours of that. There's only so long that could go on for. So most of the film is layered with contrived plot points, characters, and story elements to build up to that fight. It's all a little bit dragged on. Now, in principle, I don't really have too much of an issue with that. The problem is that there's no tension in the build-up, and the payoff doesn't feel satisfying or genuine. Despite the film boasting a fantastic production team, a massive budget, obviously, and a great cast, I wasn't left feeling anything or discovering something new to think about. I wasn't inspired or moved. I was just moderately entertained periodically. Despite all of that, I don't think this film is terrible. I actually would watch it again, which says a lot. Periodically entertained, even only moderately, is still better than not entertained at all. So let me know your thoughts below in the comments. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.